Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I want to thank Senators Durbin and Murray and Stabenow for joining us. Now, as the Trump shutdown drags on, more and more Americans are getting hurt. Public servants have been working without pay. Critical agencies are unable to perform their functions, inspecting the food supply, protecting our airports and prisons, preparing tax refunds, helping farmers, small businesses get loans. Earlier today, Senators Van Hollen, Cardin, Warner, and Warner, and Kaine wrote the president, urging him to meet with average federal workers who are being hurt by the Trump shutdown. The president says he talks to federal workers. We never see him talking to anybody, with the exception of the two people who always appear on Fox News because they're heads of the Border Patrol Union, no one else. So I agree with my colleagues from Virginia and Maryland. Let the president see the pain the Trump shutdown is causing. He'd benefit from listening to their stories of federal civil servants who are working without pay, locked out of their jobs. Maybe then President Trump will understand the damage he's causing by holding these people hostage until he gets what he wants. Meanwhile, Leader McConnell, Senate Republicans are hiding in the shadows as if they have some kind of aversion to doing their job when it involves even the slightest break with the president. Leader McConnell and Senate Republicans seem more concerned with not offending Donald Trump than helping American families. I have three words for President Trump, Leader McConnell, and our Republican senators. Open the government. Open the government. You could do it in a minute. Then we can debate border security. That's the responsible position, and it's the position the American people want. The overwhelming majority of Americans support our position, and here's the amazing thing. 39% of Republicans in the Quinnipiac poll supported the Democratic position. Don't shut down the government to get the wall, but open the government and then debate the wall. 40% of Republicans, that's a rare moment. Many more support the wall. But the number of even Republicans who support shutting down the government as a means to getting the wall is shrinking. And that's what the president's going to learn. He's losing the American people. His numbers are lower than they've been in a very, very long time. And he's not winning this fight. He ought to end the pain, open the government, and let us then debate border security, which each of us wants in different ways, and that's the American process. Now, one other point, Russia sanctions. Soon the Senate's going to move to consider a motion to proceed on a resolution of disapproval on the Treasury Department's proposal to relax sanctions on the three companies owned by Russian oligarch Oleg Deripaska. The case against the Treasury Department's proposal is strong. To go from 70% to 45%? Who are you kidding? When you have 45% of a company, you basically control it. And making it worse, another 7% is owned by Deripaska's in-laws, former in-laws. He's divorced. And then another 10% or so is owned by banks that he has a lot of say with. So this is a sham. It's a sham to do a favor not only to Deripaska, but to Putin. And at the time when it's becoming public how deep Deripaska's ties are to Putin, organized crime, but also Paul Manafort, to do this would be a disgrace. To do this, to let these sanctions go forward, would say that we're not protecting American interests against Vladimir Putin, who we know wants to weaken us in every way he can. I deeply suspect that the Trump administration would, it is deeply suspect, rather, that the Trump administration would propose sanctions for Deripaska's companies before the special counsel finished his work. And finally, and most seriously of all, there's a foreign policy issue here. President Putin's government and one of the largest Russian banks in the Russian economy have a direct interest in sanctions for Deripaska's companies. Why would we vote to relax sanctions on three essential Russian companies when Putin has not stopped or even curtailed his malign activities. This is sort of a kiss-up to Putin. It's wrong at any time, and it's even more wrong now. So I'd close by urging my Republican colleagues, whatever your view on the issue is, there's enough questions that at least we should go forward and debate it. If the Republicans are ashamed, scared, to even debate something as rudimentary as this, shame on them. Shame on them. Senator Durbin.
Thanks, Senator Schumer. Let me say at the outset, I believe that the solution to the government shutdown is obvious. It is time to open this government, and the person or persons who can convince this president happen to be his own Republicans in the United States Senate. When they step up and say to Senator McConnell, we have a role to play and a constitutional responsibility, and we want to move forward in reopening this government, this conversation changes instantly. Until then, Senator McConnell, as I just heard him say, standing at the same microphone, is going to wait for his instructions from the president. His instructions were included in the Constitution that he swore to uphold and defend. And his instructions were to lead the Senate, the separate branch of government. And I hope that enough Democrats and Republicans can come together, pass the spending bills, send them to the president, and if necessary, override the veto. That is also one of the powers in the United States Constitution given to the Senate. I'd like to say a word, too, about Stephen King. A few years ago, when he made these outrageous comments about Dreamers, I decided to go to his district in Iowa and hold a town meeting and just see who showed up. Hundreds of people came out to the town meeting, and we talked about immigration. It turns out the people of Iowa, many of them, disagree heartily in terms of the statements he's been making over the years. Maybe he crossed the bridge finally that brought many of these Republicans forward for the first time. But I'm glad that they realize that these voices of hatred have no place in either political party. And I also want to say that a word of commendation to my colleague, Tim Scott. The article that he wrote was a reminder that there has to be some common ground we all seek in trying to bring this nation back together. And I thank him for his leadership in pointing out the fact that Congressman King had crossed that line.
Senator Murray.
Well, as you all know, we are now 25 days into this completely unnecessary and absolutely absurd Trump shutdown. 25 days of workers not knowing when their next paycheck will come. 25 days of families gathered around their kitchen table trying to figure out which bills to pay and which to let slide. 25 days of trash piling up in our national parks, lines at our airports, small business owners who are waiting and waiting for their loans to come through. 25 days of chaos and dysfunction caused by this Trump shutdown, and people across the country are paying attention. They want it to end. Democrats are united. Our position could not be clearer, and it could not be stronger. We are on the side of anyone who thinks our government shouldn't spiral into chaos and dysfunction just because a president has a temper tantrum. Democrats are on the side of anyone who thinks we can have a debate about border security. It is important, and even about whether President Trump should ask American taxpayers to pay for that wall he promised Mexico would pay for. But we can have that debate without hurting millions of workers and families in the process. So we are on the side of opening up our government, ending this madness without condition or demand. So now it is up to President Trump to do the right thing. And if he won't do that, if he says no, if he's too dug in and he's committed to hurting people and playing this political game, then it is up to Senate Republicans to stand with us and send him a bill to reopen the government and end this absurd shutdown. I was deeply disappointed this morning when Leader McConnell once again blocked our effort to pass a bill that would do just that. And this comes, and I would add, just weeks after the Senate unanimously passed a bill to keep government open without funding for President Trump's wall, and after the House made it clear it would pass and send it to the president. And so if President Trump chooses to veto it, if he truly wants to keep government shut down, he will own it. But the Senate should stand up for our constituents and do the right thing, and Leader McConnell should stop standing in our way. So Democrats are going to keep fighting to do just that. We're going to keep the pressure on, and more people across the country are going to pay attention and know what's happening. Thank you.
Senator Stabenow.
Thank you. To stress what Senator Murray said, 25 days. It's 25 days since the president shut government services. And it's very clear there are two ways to move forward. One is he decides to value federal employees and federal services and to open the government and then work with us in a sincere way on how we move forward on border security in our country. We are committed to doing that and welcome that debate and working together. And the other way is for Mitch McConnell to take the power of Congress, the power of the Senate, put this on the floor, a revote of what we passed unanimously in December, have the House pass it, and if the president refuses to sign it, we can do a veto override. That's part of the constitutional process, and that's what should be used. Our constituents every day are being hurt. When I was home on Friday talking to a young woman who started a business in agriculture, she has a vineyard, and she and her young family are the ones working the vineyard, and they're ready now to actually open a small business, their winery, and their intent is to do it by Memorial Day, and now their plans have been ruined because of the shutdown because they can't get the labels, the paperwork, what they need from the USDA to open up their business, and they may not be able to have that business that her whole family has been involved in working to get going. She said, we need the government to open so we can run our business, period. And that's not too much to ask. The president yesterday was in New Orleans talking to the American Farm Bureau, and from the reports in the paper, many farmers were indicating to him what was happening for them. January is not a slow time in agriculture. It's when you plan for the next year. It's when you're getting crop reports and you're going to your banker and you're using the proposals and programs we just put in place to be able to get ready for the new year. And they can't do that. The other thing I would say in terms of agriculture that became something very interesting to me when I was down in Texas talking to farmers, along the Rio Grande and the border in Texas and many other areas are ranchers, are farmers who do not want the government confiscating their property, their land. Some have already gone to court and others will. And so this idea that there is support for government confiscating land, blocking people from having their cattle get to the river so that they lose their ranching operations is certainly something that is not true. There is not support for that. Let me finally just say that in meeting with TSA officers, as so many of my colleagues have, we all have last Friday as well, they are desperately hurting. And they are looking to us. They are doing their job. Everybody in security, air traffic control, the TSA officers, Customs and Border Patrol, and they are looking to their president and their Congress to get this thing done so they can be valued and paid for the service they provide our country.
Thank you. My colleagues, questions? Go ahead, Burgess.
Senator Schumer, when is the last time you spoke to the president, and do you have any plans to meet with him about the shutdown?
Well, I'll meet with him. Heard from him since then. Yes, welcome back, Taylor.
Congratulations on being grandfather. I know, long way.
He smiled and turned over. At 7 weeks, he's a genius.
Noah, yay Noah.
Democrats have been very critical of Senator McConnell for staying on the sidelines right now. But what about you? I mean, you seem to be deferring to Leader Pelosi to a great extent.
Not at all.
Is it just going to come down to you and McConnell figuring it out?
No, Leader Pelosi and I work very closely together. Obviously, she has a majority in the House, and we have to work together. But we speak probably 4 or 5 times a day. Yes.
The national polls, the bite of the shutdown, these are usually the triggers that bring people to the table or at least cause one side to change their position. The president doesn't seem affected by those in any way. Are you concerned that the playbook that you guys are utilizing doesn't apply to this president?
Well, look, I think that the president likes to look at just his base, But if you look at the polling, he's even beginning to lose some pieces of his base, not on the wall, but on shutting down the government for the wall. And I think it's certainly affecting our Republican colleagues in the Senate. Go ahead.
Your junior colleague from New York is set to announce she's running for president. And she's one of at least 4 women in the Senate who are planning on running. I'm just curious, first off, would you support her run? And what do you make of the fact that you have so many colleagues of both genders, and then ultimately maybe more women, who are running for president?
Well, 2 things. First, I work very well and closely with Senator Gillibrand, but I'm not mixing in the presidential political game right now. Second, I think it's great that a lot of people are running, and particularly great that a lot of women are running. Our leadership team, for instance, has 6 women, 5 men in the Senate, and extremely capable people. And I have said to every candidate who's asked me, let 1,000 flowers bloom. Let's get a lot of people out there and see who the best candidate to beat Donald Trump is. I don't know who that is right now. Yes.
Do you support Senator Marco Rubio's combating the boycott, divestment, sanctions act? And what do you think of the 2 Democratic House members who openly support the BDS?
I am a co-sponsor, so I've supported it all along.
Democrats say they won't discuss border security until the government's reopened. Republicans say we won't discuss border security to reopen the government. Are we in a staring contest?
Well, I hope not. The American people are overwhelmingly on our side. A good number of Republicans are on our side, and I think the movement is in our direction. Thank you, everybody.
Back to Russia and Putin. Can you comment on the New York Times report